Have you ever thought about getting out of the rat race? How about establishing a legacy for you and your family? We live in a land of opportunity, and it's knocking at your door right now. Stephen Davis Enterprises recruits motivated individuals looking to make a change for themselves and others. Entrepreneurialism is alive and well. Is it alive in you? If so, contact them at 915-422-6842 or follow them on Twitter at Legacy in Action. All right, family, you're tuned in to In My Humble Opinion. Title of today's show, Life's Big Questions. Okay, list of people that I chose to call in on these big questions. The first, also been a former guest of In My Humble Opinion, Rebecca Weybright. She's the executive director of Sarah. Andrea Copeland-Whitsett. She's an entrepreneur and the director of the Business Diversity Council. Jude Rogers, who is a very good friend of mine. I've known her since I was a very young girl, and she's been a friend. She's been a confidant. She and her husband are business owners, and so just a very special place in my heart. She always has good information to share, and so I had her be a guest on the show. Mahalia Dryden-Mason. I actually met Mahalia when I was working for the Charlottesville Housing Authority, and she came in to do a seminar on fair housing. She works for the Department of Professional and Occupation Regulation. Davida Wingfield is also a guest of today's show, entrepreneur, and we actually met over grant writing. We were discussing that. That's what she does, one of the businesses that she owns. And then last but certainly not least is Nikki Giovanni, and we all know her as the author and the professor out at Virginia Tech. And so those women were gracious enough, and I thank them for being guests on our big questions.
Yeah, and Max, I was so delighted when you presented this to me, this idea, and the wheels immediately started turning. So I too started thinking about who to bring in for this. So a group of fellas that I decided to reach out to. One being one of the commentators on IMHO. Our listeners are familiar with Mr. Simmons. He's a financial advisor, and he's a jack of many trades. Yep. Those who have heard Aaron on the show know that. Also, B.A. Doe himself.
Chris Newman.
Right, Chris Newman show here on 101 Jams. That brother, born and raised in Charlottesville, and gave his insight like only he can, and really enjoyed speaking with him. Matthew Murphy, who's a project assistant here for the city, doing a lot for human resources here in our area, and he's also an ordained minister. To some folk, they know him as through that. Quinton Harrell, local business owner, been here for many years. Some know him as Papers. So we got to pick his brain a little bit on this. And last but definitely not least, another local business owner, Mr. William Jones. Got to talk to Will from over at In His Image Salon. I'm so excited, and I'm hopeful, and I believe that the people will not only be entertained, but educated, and inspired by this conversation that we're about to share with them.
Certainly, and I hope that you ask yourselves these questions. Take all the information that you can, but search within yourselves and answer these questions for yourselves. And if you don't have an answer, or you see room for improvement, well, there you go, right? All right, and this is where things get interesting, because there's I think a gamut. A lot of people had the same answers, but a gamut of different responses to this next question. What is the root of racism and prejudice?
Wow.
I mean, I think the answers, speak for themselves, honestly. I can't add or take anything away from it. So you guys listen to what our guests believe is the root of racism and prejudice.
I think you have a segment of the population, people that classify themselves as white, and this is my opinion, that are not comfortable with their position on the planet globally. I will use this example. I learned it from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, and I believe it for myself to be true in my own study. The world is full of melanated people. If you put everybody in a pot, Charles, and you started really stirring that pot, everybody's going to be browns and yellows. And people classified as white, they're 10% of the population. So I think a lot of this behavior comes from fear.
I think it comes from dominance. I think it comes from wanting to put down others and not wanting to recognize differences and use them as a divider, as a divisive thing, versus saying our differences are what make us richer, make us better. I think it definitely can come from fear and ignorance, lack of exposure. Certainly some of the harsher forms come from something much stronger and more evil, I want to say, than that.
Yeah, I agree.
But I really think it comes from people either believing they're better or not wanting to accept others. I think it's still a very prevalent force in our society. And certainly recent times here have shown that.
You weren't kidding about life's questions. That's a big one, dog. Like, how much time we got? Like,
we got until the Chris Newman show comes on.
Yeah, right. Man, actually, the root of racism, self-hate, self-defecation. Black folk do as much racial things to hurt ourselves than I've ever seen any Nazi do. That's how I personally feel. I lost, in the last 10 years, I've lost at least 6-7 friends to like gun violence. Right. None of them were killed by Nazis. You know what I'm saying? To have Nazis in this town and to tell me that, I should stay at home or I should not engage and just allow them to feel like, this is their city. Now we're talking a whole different scenario. Right. Because we got it bad enough out here. I got my friends out here killing each other. I'm trying to focus on that. The last thing I need is you coming through here parading your hate around. You know what I'm saying? Right. Now we got a whole nother issue here. You know what I'm saying? Now I can't even focus on, it's the craziest thing about August 12th. And I spoke on this a couple times on my Facebook. If any of y'all want to follow me, man, it's real raunchy, but it's pretty funny and it's kind of intuitive. www.facebook.com/VA though. That's just radio stuff. It's what I do. But it's crazy, man, because the first rally that happened here, the first time they came down here, the first go around, it was a lot of, we need to come out, we need to be here, we need to be there. That same very day, I had to break up 2 kids from different neighborhoods that's like 5 minutes walking distance from each other, from killing each other. You know what I'm saying? So that was my issue. That's what I want to change in Charlottesville. Charlottesville been racist, bro. My grandma's grandma knew Charlottesville was racist. There was a whole street of businesses that existed before racism tore it down. This is not news to us. You see what I'm saying? But now my brothers is killing each other, so that's what I wanted to focus on. But it's like I gotta stop from that to deal with y'all talking about we will not replace y'all, where I never recall any of me or my friends hanging out in front of your local store saying, you know what, let's replace white men. Like, I don't remember that. So I don't know what y'all talking about, but y'all need to get up out of here. You know what I'm saying? And I know that vaguely answers your question, but this is like what I feel about that whole scenario. You know what I'm saying? Violence begets violence. I'm sick of my brothers killing each other, but I also ain't got no time for you to be prancing around my city thinking, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just gonna sit at home. Like, no.
Well, I think it speaks to the heart of man. It's the human heart, and the condition of the heart. It speaks to the reason why Jesus came on this earth. racism and discrimination and prejudiceness is spoken about very distinctly in the book of James, where he says to the Hebrew brethren that you have made distinctions among yourselves and made yourselves the judges with evil motives. So basically, it's the condition of the heart where people have made themselves judges.
Okay.
Rather than allowing God to be the judge, because God says, I am not a respecter of person, which means that no person, no ethnic group have, any more superiority than any other ethnic group. But because we are man, we have decided for ourselves to be the judge. And that is why that it is so hard to legislate with laws equality, because it's the condition of the heart, and laws cannot dictate the heart.
I might call it a fault, you know what I mean? This thing, racism. Prejudice is different. Let me just deal with that just real quick, then we'll get to racism. Prejudice meaning to prejudge, obviously, right? We do that every day. You see somebody roll up in a 750 BMW, you assume he's rich. He could be the dude detailing the car, getting ready to drop it back off to the doctor, at his office. But we assume this guy driving is rich. We're prejudging. We prejudge someone who's wearing a suit versus someone who's wearing, work gear and that's got mud on it, right? But we also prejudge, I think, from a very natural perspective, meaning, we have to size up, right? From a danger perspective, right? As animals, if you would, right? Is this person, thing, place a threat to me? Right? We might prejudge that place based on the signage out front, the trash in the parking lot, when you walk in, the smell, the colors, the light, whatever, and we begin to make assumptions and draw conclusions and then begin making decisions, right? So that happens in all kinds of perspectives in our life, and it happens with people. In this case, we're talking about race. So the difference between prejudging a threat, 6'7", guy with a beard and sunglasses at night, and a leather jacket on, it's 94 degrees outside, you're looking like he might be a threat to me. Now, notice I didn't say anything about color, but you probably had a color of a person come to your mind when I made that statement, right? And so all these things, these are taught, these are things that we believe. He could be a gentle giant. He could be an angel in the neighborhood, and he's looking out for everybody at night. You don't know, but we prejudge even from a safety perspective. So that side of it, it's taught, there's a fault in it, there's some wrong to it when it comes to race relations, right? Because now we start talking about, I'm prejudging you based on your skin color, not whether you have a suit on, a tie, a hoodie, a jean jacket. I don't care. Your skin causes me to think these things, right? That's the other side of prejudice, right? And I think some of that's rooted in racism and white supremacy. So let's now then go to that angle of what racism is. I think there's an inherent power that's attached to racism. So I don't think I don't know if necessarily black people can be racist, right? Because we don't have the ability to use our blackness as a means of power over someone in the way that white people can. Does that make sense? So now from that angle, from the kind of a white supremacist, racist angle, it would be, and this is what's been taught to us for 200, 300 years, that white people are the baseline of humanity. Everything else is a derivative of that, right? They're the ones in power, and so they maintain this idea that this is the supreme group, right? And they use that idea that's been ingrained in us, in the churches, in the schools, in the workplace, in the neighborhoods, right? It's been shoved down our throats, and they use that to maintain and obtain more control and power. Right. Yeah, does that make sense? So now we start talking about how people can be not racist, but still support white supremacy, right? Because that's a reality that can happen. So you can have somebody who's not taking their own person, their own privilege as a white person necessarily, right? And using that to their benefit with an intentionality over top someone else, right? They're aware of that privilege. They're aware of that. They're not using it, but there could be other areas of their life that they're supporting that. I think at its core is sin, is a brokenness, and it's also taught. Okay, so it's not something that's natural to us. It's something that's passed down or taught to us, and so that's why we can never neglect the systemization of it. You know what I mean? Because it's been instilled in the institution of America. I always tell people when I have this conversation, I'll probably get some angry folks behind this one, but I call in many ways Charlottesville the cradle of white supremacy in this way, that some of the foundational documents and doctrines came right out of here. From the great idol of Thomas Jefferson himself. Right? So let us not forget this great experiment that we call America, that capsule, that initial pill that was swallowed that says we're better than everybody else. Much of that is, in an American standpoint, now that it wasn't here when the Europeans came, but from an American perspective, in a very Americanized way, started here. So I'm not surprised. You know, I feel like in many ways the veneer of progressivism kind of got washed away. Because when you talk to some black people, we're not surprised that Donald Trump won. We're not surprised that these things are happening. It's unfortunate, we're upset, we're distressed, but we're not surprised. Right. In the meanwhile, people thought because, fill in the blank, we had a black president, we did this, Martin Luther King did that, schools are this, things are better. That's like basically saying, yeah, you got a house, the foundation's rickety, might come down, but we put some new paint on it. Doesn't it look better? And then we'll get mad at you because you're like, I mean, sure, it looks fine, but that's not the problem. And so there's this constant distraction that's kind of being put in front of black people that says, hey, stop looking so deeply into the problem. Give us solutions. You want me to tell you it's okay to paint the wall, and I'm telling you the foundation's cracked.
It's fear.
Okay.
It's all fear. Because, you know, even when we trace back the historic foundations of such poor race relations throughout the United States and even throughout the world, you will find that some people were takers. Some people felt entitled to take. Some people felt entitled to deem themselves superior than others. Well, that's like an evil trick. That's like an evil trick of fear, you know. Those who feel that they have to conquer others, that they have to have the superior position in the world or in their community or in their country, it's a fear-based notion that is out of a lie. Because if they were rooted in the truth, who is Jesus Christ, he said, I am the truth, then they would already know that they already have a superior position. Why are you looking for something that you already have? You don't have it because you don't have Jesus in your heart. You're dark, you're fearful, you're operating out of a spirit of lies. But if you ever switch over to love, you will discover not that you have what you're looking for, but that you always had it. It's inside of you. It's not about what color the people are. Get over it. Just get over it. Like brown people will be the majority in the United States. You know, I guess it's by 2025. And get over it.
And we can all live here in harmony.
Well, I mean, actually, it's not the brown people's doing. So this was engineered. It was a social experiment that went dreadfully wrong. The brown people had nothing to do with it. Therefore, and for choose life, choose love. Right. Life is too short.
My lens has formulated from a business standpoint on how I can wrap my mind around racism, because sometimes when I think about it, it gets so overwhelming, gets so frustrating, you know, that it can wake me up at night, wake me up early in the morning, and you just don't know you feel kind of hopeless, right? So where I've come to in my life right now, my lens, how I wrap my mind around it, to understand it is simply, racism is simply a tool for competition. It is a competitive tool in order to direct our finite resources to one team as opposed to another.
Okay.
Some white cats got together at some point in our world's history and said, yo, it's a whole lot of people of color. Wherever we travel, there's people of color everywhere, Joe. We this small little group, Joe. We got to figure out. We got if we don't do something,
right,
we gonna get wiped off the planet. You know what I mean? And these cats that, these cats that didn't know nothing at one point, but somebody taught them something. Somebody taught them how to do things, taught them how to build, taught them how to think, taught them how to walk, all types of things like that. I don't want to go too deep in it, but it's that mindset, man, of if you come from nothing, if you come from an area on the globe that lacked everything, when you come to an area and come to around a people that had everything, you might get they got grimy with it.
Yeah.
When you come for nothing, you want it all.
Yeah.
You don't just want yours, you want everybody's. Right? And in order for you to operate in that state, you have to define and dehumanize in order to justify your greed or the evil that you have within that you don't recognize as evil. You just justify it.
Yeah.
Right? So, damn, my bad, I didn't want to go that deep, but
you good.
So long story short, it is a means, it is a competitive means to direct the resources to me and mine, so that him and his don't get nothing.
Right.
Because I want it all. You know what I mean? And so with that as the precept and as the concept, then you've gotten a whole, just years and years of residual effects of this competition. How you define black people, how their mind works, and all the all the residuals of their, lazy, they're dangerous, they're violent, they're hypersexual, they're this, they're that, they're yada yada yada. All those are just labels, man.
Yeah.
And what's unfortunate is that it's been, this program has been built upon and fantastical strategic plans have been implemented. And one that we all talk about is like the Willie Lynch letters.
Right.
When slavery was very prevalent when it started in America, but that wasn't the only strategic plan that somebody made in this game of competition. In this game of life where it's about competing for resources and having the most and taking care of your own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's so much, and it's been compiled over the decades and over the centuries that we have drank the Kool-Aid, man.
Yeah.
And we use those same concepts against ourselves. You know what I mean? So it's so very overwhelming when you're just operating and communicating with each other, with within the same race or with other races, when you are caught up in racism, because it's just simply a competitive tool. But when you immerse yourself down into that game right there, it's hard to come out. It's hard to build upwards. It's hard to build vertically and build out of it, because when you operating on a horizontal down, it's like you down on the chessboard rather than being up on the chessboard looking at it at the bird's eye view.
It's like people dealing with white supremacy. If the white people who thought they were supreme, If they were the best in the world, then they wouldn't have to go around killing people, burning people's things down. They wouldn't have to do that. They would be able to compete. It would be so basic. But they can't compete, so they get into bunches. And, of course, now they're not putting the Ku Klux Klan, they're not hiding their faces anymore. And you have to give Black Lives Matter credit for that, because Black Lives Matter walk down the street and say, we're not scared of you, and we're not hiding our faces. This is who we are. And everybody got mad. Oh, you know, these people are they shouldn't be doing that. They're dangerous. No, they're walking down the street. You can see their faces. The Klan comes at midnight to your house and takes your 14-year-old boy and beats him to death. That's crazy. And you think you're so big. You think that white supremacists, if you think you're supreme, then you ought to be able to compete. You ought to be good enough. I think I'm a good poet. And so if I think I'm a good poet, I shouldn't have to go and destroy everybody else's poetry. Right? And they need to stop that, because they're not that good. If this is the only way you can show who you are, then that's you're not supreme. Racism and prejudice are all of that. Who is supreme and who's not? It's usually about money. And if we found another way to, which we will eventually, money is, as you know, going out. Because, you know, you can run into people today. They were selling Carol Lee donuts. I teach my morning class over at McBride, and they were selling Carol Lee, and I love Carol Lee donuts, but I don't have money. And one of my students says, I think I might have $1, Nick, I can give you $1. And I just felt embarrassed. You know, maybe I should start carrying $1 around. I don't carry money. People like that fool in the White House are greedy and they want everything. Or people like the NCAA in the misuse of the young men and women who do sports in colleges and stuff. But for the most part, the money is going to go out. And we're going to find another exchange. And I think that it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be good.
Do you think what's happening in Charlottesville is about money?
I think it almost, of necessity, has to be about power.
Okay.
And power is usually about
associated with money. Yeah.
And so they say, well, we don't want Lee's statue to be taken down. Well, Lee, first of all, lost. So the first thing I would do, if I was in Charlottesville, we don't have any statues here at Virginia Tech, as you know, but I would put I wrote a poem in my new book. Okay. Note to the South, you lost. And so I would put that there. But if I were mayor of Charlottesville, you know, quite naturally, it's got to come down, because it's just foolish. It only came up because of segregation, right? And that was in the 20s and 30s when it didn't come up during the Civil War. It didn't. And they lost. And the reason that we had segregation was that rich white people wanted to keep poor white people poor, and poor white people are stupid. And we know that. If there's one thing you could say about as a group, they're stupid. And so they were like, oh yeah, we're white and we're going to show our power. They have no power. And we can look at it right now. You know, if we walked up the Appalachian Trail, and I have a great admiration for the history of Appalachia, we would see bad teeth. We would see grown men doing drugs. We would see also grown men who beat their wives and their daughters. Excuse that, but that's what we would see. And we would see people like Donald Trump taking advantage of that, because he wants to be a billionaire, and he knows that as long as he can keep these people thinking, well, I'm white and I got it made, they'll do. It's like the people who did the fighting in the Civil War. And you look at, why in the world? And that's one reason I admire Appalachia, because when we look at West Virginia, it wouldn't be West Virginia because it was West Virginia, was the area that said, it was Appalachia that said, we will not send our sons to die so that the Shenandoah can have slaves. And they didn't. They withdrew from Virginia. Very important, because when you look at it, now we've got Ohio River is now going to become a part of the North. It's going to become a part of the winning team, and that's going to keep the South from being able to come up, right? Very, very, very important. But we've got people now who actually believe, oh yeah, we should admire these people. There's nothing to admire.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Forgiveness is a tough one. Everyone always tells you have to forgive, right? So we have a question in here. What is the purpose of forgiveness?
Yeah, the purpose of forgiveness is for the individual, and it's for you as the individual. It's not the other person. The purpose of forgiveness is for you. It's so you can release all that pent-up energy, all that hostility, all that guilt, and all that shame. Because sometimes we have to forgive ourselves for stuff we don't even know about, and how we reacted to certain situations, and how we react to other people. And it's very difficult because we all carry these feelings. We all carry these emotions. And a lot of it can just be gone if we just talk about forgiveness and just moving forward. But a lot of times it's easier to be mad than it is to forgive. Truth be told. It's a lot easier to be like, oh, I'm going to talk bad about you, as opposed to, man, this thing is spiritually holding me. I need to release this. Even if you're doing me wrong, I need to release this. But now how do I deal with it moving forward? That doesn't mean you come back into my life or I allow this thing back into my life, but how do I release this thing from my spirit so I can move forward and be a better human being?
I think forgiveness can be very self-serving. I think it can give a person a way to find closure and to move on from something. If you are willing to, especially if you're willing to forgive somebody who harmed you, then essentially, hopefully, you can put that aside and move forward. Anger and hatred can be very all-consuming. So if you can find forgiveness, it can potentially help you yourself to heal and move forward. I think forgiveness can also be used very manipulatively from people. Somebody asking to be forgiveness, because I think it's really got to come from within your own heart to forgive someone who's harmed you, and even sometimes to forgive yourself for something you did.
Tough sometimes.
From a life perspective, the purpose for forgiveness in one way is that of freedom. There's a sense of freedom when you are able to let go of a pain or wrong done to you, right? We know medically, scientifically, if that's the evidence you require, that stress, bitterness cause problems. You gain weight. You can have health problems. Your blood pressure can get jacked up and funky, right? Some people break out and get acne and skin problems, right? All because of stress. I'm not saying it's all about unforgiveness, but unforgiveness breeds bitterness, breeds ongoing anger and hostility, which in turn affects and impacts your health. So even if you say, you know what, I don't believe any of that God stuff you're talking about, I want to live my best life now, I want to live this life. Well, if you still, even with that perspective, don't know how to forgive, you are going to reap the repercussions of that unforgiveness. So one, I think, is freedom and health. Those are two things. And then lastly, we need forgiveness because we're all human. Who has not made a mistake? Who has not needed forgiveness? So let us give what we want to get back, I mean, there's a reciprocity to it, right? I mean, I'd like to be forgiven because I know I'm going to mess up. I know I have messed up. That being said, that's going to happen. That's human. That's part of the human experience. And I think forgiveness is a key component to that in order to really have like a joyful life, if you would.
Okay.
So let me just go back just real quick, because you also asked, like, kind of in this context, what does that mean? I think there can be a genuine forgiveness for wrongs done, and you're going to be leery, and that's okay. Forgiveness doesn't mean that everything's back to the way it was. Forgiveness means that we're now free to move on, whatever that means. That might mean our roads now split from here, right? In this season, in this time that we've faced here in Charlottesville and really in the past few years, I've had several situations with people that I know that I've had to kind of rethink my relationship with them. Not that I don't care about them any differently than I did before, but I recognize that, it's not best that we continue along the road that we've been on. And so, maybe they've forgiven me, I've forgiven them, but we're not going to continue in the way that we once had.
It's definitely a liberation of the mind, soul, body, and spirit, because when there is is when a person is holding unforgiveness towards someone, whether they realize it or not, it's doing something physically and emotionally and mentally to the body. And I didn't realize until years later how much it had affected me and how it was affecting me. So, my whole thing was, Lord, I don't want to continue with the rest of my life having this thing, giving it so much control over my life. Yeah, exactly. And I want to be able to truly be set free, and that's what forgiveness does. It's about liberation. That's a good word.
Forgiveness is complicated from the standpoint that we've been taught, I think, a very superficial forgiveness. Like we've been taught like this weird kind of, doormat type of forgiveness where someone apologizes and you accept it and you just move on. That's like doormat to me.
Yeah.
For me, forgiveness, first of all, if you do something to me, it's necessary for me to forgive so that what you did doesn't run my life.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't cause me to do all types of bad stuff all because I'm hurt still. So to me, it's imperative to forgive so that I can be free. But for me, that also doesn't mean that I have to have relationship with you the same way that I did, because that trust, that has to be rebuilt. Yeah. And so if you've done something that breaks down that trust, breaks down like that communication, like all of that stuff has to be rebuilt. And so I've forgiven you, but that don't mean that we are in the same place that we were before, because number one, I got to protect myself, right? I got to love myself. And so am I loving myself if the person that hurts me, I allow back into my life without them proving that they've changed so that they can hurt me again? Like that's not loving myself. That's not healthy. And so I got to love myself enough and love them enough to protect them, because the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you, but you fool me twice. Now something really might happen because I've allowed you back in, and now you do it again. Now what am I left to do? I feel like I have to hurt you. Like I feel like I have to do something drastic because I played myself now. So now I'm mad at myself, all of this stuff. So I say forgiveness is a good thing. I think that it's admirable if you can forgive, and I think it's healthy for you if you can forgive. But I don't think that it's this kind of haphazard thing to approach and just throw around like, I forgive them so now they can be back in my life, because people do stuff to you, man, that is like, sometimes it's unforgivable. Like you can't get past it, but it's necessary to, because that stuff will destroy you. So I would say forgiveness is very necessary.
Self-peace.
Self-peace.
Self-peace. Forgiveness, some people say that forgiveness is about giving another person power. It is not. Forgiveness is about saying, you know what? You will not cause me to hurt anymore. Yes, you've hurt me, but I'm going to pray for you. Do you know how powerful that is?
But it's seen as weakness.
I'm going to forgive you. Yeah. Okay. That's powerful. So forgiveness is more of a healing for the person that is forgiving than it is a letting go of power. You've taken back control of what the situation was, and you're able to say, you know what? I look at you as a human being. You make mistakes. I forgive you. But then I say a little bit more. Don't try this crap again.
To be like God.
Okay.
That's it. That's the beginning and the end.
Oh, you have to forgive. Whatever Jesus means to you, and I don't have a problem, whatever, But whatever Jesus means, he taught us to forgive. I'm a big fan of Jesus, and I'm a big fan of forgiveness. Because if you can't learn to forgive, look at our people. I mean, one of the reasons you have to really admire Black Americans is that we are not only forgiving, but we are hopeful. In all of the years since we've been on this part of the planet, since we've been on what ultimately became the United States, we have been hopeful. And we came here, we were sold, and then we were sold yet again, but we were hopeful. And I think that's wonderful. And in the hope, we offered forgiveness. So even down to our regular thing right here, when that fool, Mr. Roof, shot all of those people in a church, we forgave him.
Are we too forgiving?
I don't think there's such a thing as too forgiving. Now, there's also a law. Now, because we're forgiving doesn't mean the law doesn't work. So quite naturally, we would like to see Mr. Roof executed, because whatever it is that he's done is just too much for us to bring back. But in terms of, if that was my mother or my grandmother, I would have to forgive, because if I don't forgive, what's going to happen to me?
All right, our very last question to close out our show. We asked our guests to finish this sentence, okay? I'd like for you to do the same thing. I believe. So we'll listen to how our guests answer this final question or finish this sentence here. All right? I believe.
I believe.
I can fly.
All right.
I believe I can touch the sky.
Now, are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious. Of course, I'm not serious, but yes, I'm serious. I've been waiting all day for you to ask me that one question so I could quote R. Kelly and look at you stern in your face with all seriousness, and you look at me like, wait, what? Does he really believe he can fly? That's what I'm saying. I believe in laughter, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Joy, happiness. Laugh it off. Buck up, Bart. Everything will be all right. That's what I believe in. You know what I'm saying, man?
I believe what Romans 8:28 says, that all things work together for the good of them who love him and who are called according to his purpose. It took one of life's hardest experience, my mom's sudden death, to truly realize that scripture is truth. That all things do work together, even if it's bad. I know that there's someone probably listening right now who is probably feeling like they're just at the bottom. They're looking up at the bottom and saying, how can you say that? Believe me. It took some deep, painful experiences for me to realize God can bring good out of some of the most ugliest of life situations. And so Romans 8:28 is one of those scriptures that I believe that all things do work together for good.
I believe that no one can know for certain. I believe that we got to learn about ourselves. Ourself as an individual, ourself as a people. We have been leaders and all of that stuff, but we aren't taught it, so we don't aspire to it. And so knowledge of self, I believe that knowledge of self is a huge thing for a young Black man, a young Black girl to have.
I believe in this world. I believe that what we're dealing with now is an eye-opener, that as your questions have asked, from this experience, we will learn not to make the same mistake again.
Right.
I believe that there are very, very smart people in this world, and that those smart people need to use that smartness not only to make money, but to make changes. I believe that in this lifetime, I'm going to see those changes started.
Okay.
I am 29 days away from 61, and I need to see those changes started. And I believe that I will work hard to be one of the movers and shakers.
I believe life isn't fair, but it's good.
I believe it's a good idea to be alive. And I believe that when the time comes, however the time comes, I hope that I am able to accept my death. I don't see me whining, but you never know. Shit, you get shot and you might whine, but I'd be embarrassed if I did.
I believe this was a hell of a show.
I agree. I certainly agree, and I hope that our guest. I appreciate our guests for joining us, but I hope that our listeners, man, I hope you got something out of this. Like if you didn't, you did something wrong. Like you weren't listening. So there you have it, life's questions on In My Humble Opinion. I say that we do this every year. It's a nice
Great way to kick off the year.
It's a nice way to either close it out or kick it off. Pull other members out of our community to answer the very same questions. So, or not so local.
We've had some outstanding guests. So starting this year off with this show, looking to bigger and better things.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you to all of our listening audience, and thank you for supporting us. And we're going to do it again. We're going to try to ramp up the things that we do well, and just make this a better show, and give the people something that they can really benefit from. So
that's right. That's right.
All right. So you're tuned in to In My Humble Opinion.
And if you missed any of the show today, or you want to recommend it to friends, family, anyone who may have missed it, make sure you hit us online. It can be reachable, IMHO 101 Jams. You can inbox us on Facebook or Gmail for it, or especially subscribe to our YouTube channel. In My Humble Opinion, IMHO 101 Jams.
That's right.
Sir Charles.
Miss Max. Until next time.